Hello, and we're looking at lists and storing multiple things in Python today. I'm joined here with Mr. Rajiv Jr. Hopefully he won't make too much noise, however he may decide to contribute to the discussion. So you had a backpack task, and this task was saying, okay, if you have an RPG game and text-based one, make things simple. And you're trying to store things, how would you store them? Using Python as an example, but it's applies for all programming languages. And I looked at all the different solutions, and a lot of people did something similar to sort of item 1 equals this, item 2 equals that, item 3 equals this. And so they made it so you can have 4, 5 or 6 different items, and you can edit those, and they did things like that. There was a very nice solution which put everything into a string and then kept track of how many items have been put in there. So there are ways to do it. However, I think both of the methods tried, they do get quite difficult. So if you are doing it with a string, then it's very difficult to then remove the items and to edit things and to manipulate it in general. When you're using the many variables, it makes things look a bit awkward when there's 6 of them. And you're having to pass those around, you have to do different things with them, you have to go through each of the different ones. What happens if you then have, say, 100 items? What happens if you make it all with 100 and then the boss comes along and says, actually, it needs to do 200? We're just looking at backpacks at the moment, but ideally you'd want to be able to store different things. What happens if you're doing products for a supermarket? You don't want to say, actually, the supermarket can only stock however many items. You don't want to have to do a different variable for each potential item that they store. So it's finding different ways. Also, if you've got 6 variables, what happens if you only want to store 1 item? You've still got those over the 5 kicking around which you have to program with, so you have to program to the maximum as opposed to just saying, hey, we have this many now, let's work with that. So there, funnily enough, is a better way of doing things. And yes, surprisingly enough, these are called lists. So a list is essentially a single variable that can hold multiple things in it. So you can look at this example, and this is creating a variable called items, so all the items in your backpack, and it's currently saying that it's an empty list. There's nothing in your backpack, so the square brackets is how it's saying, oh yeah, it's a list, but there's nothing in the brackets, so it's an empty list. You can, instead of saying, okay, it's an empty list, you can say, okay, items equals lunch and snacks. So we've put 2 items in there, separated with a comma, inside the square brackets. You can do things either way. You can create it with things in there to start with. It's entirely up to you. So if you want to actually access the items, if you want to say, okay, what's in the backpack and show it to the user or do some processing on it, then you can just print items in itself and it prints out like this. It's not particularly user-friendly, but it works. It's great for the first versions, it's great for debugging. You can access individual ones in the same way that we did with strings. So you can say items, square brackets, 0 will be the first one, 1 would be the 1th one, and so on. So items, square bracket, and then the number. This is just printing it. You can use that same bit in the brackets in order to check if something equals something, see if they've got a sword in the backpack, all sorts of things like that. Okay, how do you add something to that list? So when you've picked up the Sword of Doom, or in this case, dessert, much more important, how do you add that into... If you heard that, that was Mr. Rajiv Jr., not me. Being rude. So how do you add it? Well, you can append it. And yes, that is proper English, just weird terminology. So appending just means adding something onto the end. So there you can see it's appending dessert. So if we go back to that, two things that would be comparable is that or items equals square brackets, items.append lunch, items.append snacks would be exactly the same as doing that. It makes no difference. Okay, so with .append, it adds it onto it. You don't need anything else other than that. Just items.append, whatever you want to whack into it, and that would do it. Notice that here, each of these is a string. You can do this with integers, you can do this with whatever data type you want. It's just, at the moment, for this example, it makes sense with strings. Okay, how do you actually remove something from the list? Well, if we remember our indexing, 0, 1, 2, we can just say pop 1, and that would be 0, 1. So we'll pop snacks out of the list, and it will just go pop, and then you'll be left with those two. Or you can say actually remove any item which says snacks, any item which says whatever, and then that will just search through, find it, and then remove it. This method's kind of nicer, it's more foolproof, you know what's happening with it, but you can do that. Either one of these gives the result of, funnily enough, lunch and dessert without snacks, so it's just taking it straight out of the middle. You can take it out from wherever. So pop 0 would take lunch out, pop 2 would take dessert out, pop 3 would cause an error. Okay, what about looping over a list? Well, firstly, why would you want to loop over a list? Well, it makes it a lot easier to manage, to go over everything and either print it out nicely or to process it, or things like that. You may want to loop over and see, does the sword or whatever exists in the list, or loop over everything and change each item to level 2. There's lots of different things which you may want to loop over a list for. So how can we do it? Well, the easiest way is looping over by item. So you just say for I in, and instead of saying range, which would go over the numbers in a range, you say for I in items, then it goes over each and every item in the list. So I would be lunch, then it would be snacks, then it would be dessert. So just print out those 3 things on separate lines. Or you can do it by index. So here we've got the length of the items. So if we're taking this example, the length is 3. So that will say for I in range 3. So the length of items is how many items are there. Well, I in range 3, so it goes 0, 1, 2. Print items I. So items 0 first, which is lunch. Items 1, which is snacks. Items 2, which is dessert. So both of these are doing exactly the same thing, just in a slightly different way. This one looks a lot neater. However, if you want the ID whilst you're doing this, then this way is got all the information. So you could say print item I is, and then that would print out item 0 is lunch, item 1 is snacks, item 2 is dessert. If you want to get the numbering sorted, you could say print item I plus 1 is, and then that will go item 1 is lunch, item 2 is snacks, item 3 is desserts. So it gives you more information that you can work with, but either of those works. Okay, let's have a look at that in Thonny, shall we? So we got Thonny, and we've just got items, lunch, snacks, and if we just run that, funny enough, it doesn't actually do anything. If we, however, print that, let's have a look. There we go. So it's printed lunch and snacks. So just exactly the same as there. If we print 0, then it just prints lunch. If we print 1, it just prints snacks. If we print 2, it says, what on earth are you doing? There is no 2. There we go. Index out of range. There's no index. You may find this familiar from when we were doing strings. So my string equals hello. We had that. That's very similar, isn't it? And that would print out L. One would print out E. So yeah, you've got the same concept, because actually a string is just a list of letters. So it's handled in exactly the same way as a list, so it's very familiar to what we've been doing. Let's get rid of that for now. So that is snacks. So item 1 is snacks. Okay, so if we're now adding something into the list, then we can do that with that line, and then as if by magic is added that. We could quite easily have our program say we could easily do that. So we're starting with an empty list and just adding everything in the program, and that is doing exactly the same thing. There we go. So it's added the 3 items, and then it's printing it all out. If you're not convinced, then we can print it after each step, so that you're just adding each one at a time. Okay, so that's got our 3 items. Now the next thing is removing them. So all you need to do is pop it. So if we pop 0, that will take out lunch. If we pop 1, that would have taken out snacks. Popping 2 will take out dessert. Just going to print that at the beginning so we can see. There we go. So pop 2 just took off the last one. Pop 1 just took off snacks. Pop 0 took off lunch. Now you're going to actually be careful with these, because consider what that will do. So if we're starting with lunch, snacks, dessert, we pop item 0, then we pop item 1, what do we have left? So have a quick ponder. What do you think? Get the answer in your head, say it out loud, tell someone. What's the answer? What would be left if we did popped item 0, then popped item 1? Let's have a look. Snacks. How many of you thought dessert? Now let's have a look and see what it's actually doing. So what we can do is put that print statement in there, and hopefully that makes it a bit clearer. So there's your original list, then it's popping item 0, which is lunch, so that lunch is gone. Now we've got this, so that is printed here. Now it's popping item 1, that's item 0, that's item 1. Hello. So notice as you pop something, as you manipulate the list, the indexing changes. And yeah, the numbering is also called the indexing. Okay, so that is how to remove things by ID, by index. You can also remove things by words, by the contents of the thing. So if we take this lot out, so you could say remove snacks, and that's just taking snacks out of the list. You can say lunch, that will take lunch out, and so on. Okay, so that printed out in quite a clunky way. So now if we say for I in items, we can just print I. Let's have a look. There we go. So if we make it a bit nicer, there we go. You have lunch, snacks, dessert. I'll take that out just to make things even neater. There we go. That's looking more like a proper program. You can do all sorts of things. So. Okay, what happens if we wanted to number each of these? It gets a bit clunky and we have to add in another thing. So if you recall, we talked about doing for I in range. And there's 3 items in items that we want for I in range 3, but we don't particularly want to have it for I in range 3, then they add something or remove something and it's a different value. So how do we do that? Well, we can say for the length of items. So that says, okay, how many items are there in items? And then it will loop to that number. Now if we just run that, it's printing I, which is 0, then 1, then 2. As we recall, we can access each of the items by saying items 0, items 1, items 2. So that will print out each of the items. And as we had I, which was 0, 1, 2, we do that, there we go. Item 0, item 1, item 2 is lunch, snacks, dessert. If we don't like the fact that that's offset, there we go. Bear in mind, if you're saying, okay, now remove item 1, that's item 1 as far as the computer is concerned. You can be tweaking it, say minusing and plussing whenever you're talking to and from the user. So that's working with lists and how you can do things and make things a lot neater. This opens up a whole load of different possible projects. A lot of the tasks that I've been trying to set you are sort of, hang on, I can't do that because we haven't gone through lists yet. I really wanted to make sure a lot of the stuff before this is a lot more solid before we get onto that. Just a quick thing, want to have a look at functions. So if we've got a function called print items, which all it's going to do is just print things really nicely. There we go. Now instead of that, we can just say print items, and that will just print all that in a really nice way. Now firstly, that needs to be before we use it. There we go. And now if we run that, it's going to get there and go into there. So let's have a quick look at that. clear that. There we go. Now ideally what we should be doing is passing this items list into here. So we can say items and then items there. And now we don't need to pass through items 1, item 2, item 3, item 4, item 5, item 6, and so on. We just pass in items and that contains everything we need. So we're passing arguments in and that works properly. Okay, hopefully that will help with your programs. Best of luck.